Dzień dobry wszystkim Państwu, witamy serdecznie już w południe. 66. edycja Międzynarodowego Festiwalu Muzyki Współczesnej Warszawska Jesień. No i jak dla nas pierwszy dzień spotkań z kompozytorami. Za nami pierwsze otwierające tę edycję spotkań, tę edycję festiwalową z Fuzje Might, irańską kompozytorką, a przed nami niezwykła postać, Yannis Kyriakides. So hello to everyone. I feel so honored and so blessed to be a host and be a moderator of this composer meeting today with incredible person, Yannis Kyriakides.
Thank you, Aleksandra. I mean, it's a really pleasure for me to be here as well. Like, I was so happy to have the opportunity to present the piece here last night, and I think I've have a history of coming to the Warsaw Autumn for a few years now, and it's always great to be here. It's always like I love the audience here, and I love the musicians here also. So thanks.
If there's any need to this meeting to be translated, please let me know. We're doing a little summary at the end, so maybe it's not going to be that long. Będziemy robić takie małe resume. Bardzo proszę, żeby Państwo czuli się absolutnie tutaj nie tylko gośćmi, ale w ogóle gospodarzami tego spotkania, zadawali pytania. Jeśli będą jakiekolwiek wątpliwości, czasami osoba prowadząca spotkanie też jest pod wrażeniem tak dużym, że zapomina jakiegoś słowa albo po polsku, albo po angielsku, więc proszę się czuć absolutnie tutaj otwartym i swobodnym. Yannis Państwa przywitał również i podkreślił to, że to zawsze jest wielka przyjemność być na tym festiwalu. Jest to któryś raz z rzędu. Okay, so let me begin with a little bit of privacy. I touched your music and I heard your music first time more than 20 years ago. So it's 2002. And I found this man is really incredible. It's quite a character because he put mezzo-soprano plus insects and electronics. Yes, this is the piece that is written for a mezzo-soprano plus insects. Yes. So to me, it was quite obvious that sound means for you absolutely everything. Nature, object, and produced sound. A lot of interesting aspects in this. But then we could see you here in the conversation, I think, with Andrzej Chłopecki. He passed away, unfortunately, great musicologist. It's 2007. So I think a lot of happened since that moment. And I must say that you, being a young composer, and I'm looking at your list and it's overwhelming.
Not so young anymore. Yeah.
List of the pieces is really impressive. So I feel so honored also to be a host of this today meeting. Let me make a little bit riddle for you. Riddle at the beginning. About who or what we're talking about, also riddle, zagadka dla Państwa również. Surgeon, apothecary, geologist, paleontologist, and political activist. Best know from work an essay on the shaking palsy. About whom we're talking? What do you think?
Say it again. So the first, Serbian. Did you say?
Political activist, paleontologist, geologist, apothecary, surgeon.
Surgeon.
Surgeon, yes.
Surgeon.
Yes. And best know from the essay, an essay on the shaking palsy, described as paralysis agitans.
That was, yeah. I read that. That was...
James Parkinson.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Skąd ta zagadka na początek, drodzy Państwo? Oczywiście zapytałam...
That was the original text on Parkinson's disease.
Exactly. Zapytałam Yannisa, czy rozpoznaje, o kim mowa, że paleontolog, że aktywista polityczny i cała lista innych zasług, ale autor pierwszej pracy, published in 1817, pierwszy artykuł, pierwsze rozpoznanie choroby zwanej dzisiaj Parkinson. Choroba Parkinsona, Parkinson disease. So little riddle, maybe now it sounds a little bit weird, but I mean in your piece that we heard yesterday, you're talking about the depersonalization.
Yeah.
And to me, when I read first, before I could listen your music yesterday, before I read the whole story, the whole background, I found this absolutely amazing. But I thought also that we have a long list of disease, and it's described by person, and it's a kind of depersonalization also to me. But because now it's not James Parkinson, it's a Parkinson disease. So this immediately compared to me to this text that you put about a little bit about this, what this was the background. But it's really fantastic. So I'm sure that we can listen a little bit more about this new piece. And I think the audience is also waiting for this.
Yeah.
But we have a presentation by yourself about.
I mean, we can start talking about the piece as well, and then I could do the presentation afterwards. Because my plan was to talk a bit about media scores in general, which is another interest that I have, that I've had the last 10 or so years. And of course, the piece last night, I wouldn't be classed as media scores because it was very much a traditional notation, albeit with live electronics and other stuff. But about the Parkinson thing, we could talk about a bit the piece.
Please,
because
yes.
So the history of this piece is that I was actually asked to write a piece about Parkinson's disease. So it didn't come from my own initiative in this case. And I found it really hard to find a way in to talk about something that certainly didn't afflict me, and that, you know, I know a few people who suffer from it, but I found it difficult to actually get a perspective, like a general overview that would be, let's say, go beyond the idea of like just the sort of symptoms of Parkinson's disease. And so one of the people that I had been in contact with had this surgery, which is a DBS surgery, deep brain stimulation, which is where you have probes inserted into the brain, and you can control these oscillations that the probe gives, like with a kind of external device, in order to alleviate some of the symptoms. So, and it works really well for a lot of people in like alleviating the shaking, but also some of the other symptoms. And actually, this procedure is beginning to be used more and more for other things, also for depression, for like symptoms caused by alcoholism, for instance, and also I think Alzheimer's as well. I'm not totally sure. Like I think I read somewhere, but so I found that actually aspect interesting, just because. Firstly, like surgeons, I read also, and I heard some audio from it, that surgeons actually use audio to navigate through the brain when they're making these procedures, because they can hear, like from the output coming from these probes, which part of the brain they're in. And actually, these probes go to a certain part of the brain, subthalamus, so I was interested in that, and especially like reading articles that said that some of the negative symptoms can be this idea of alienation from oneself, because if you're controlling how you feel just by this device, it changes so drastically how you feel that you begin to think, oh, is this me, or is this some machine that's defining who I am? So I think this aspect is kind of something that's relevant for maybe all of us, and also because these procedures are going to become more common for many things. What they call I can't remember the technical term for it. Neuro enhancement, I think, something like that. Like it involves also like medicinal transformation of like brain activity. So I found that interesting, how something that does help you also alienates you from who you are. So
You're talking about the device that the bass clarinet player used yesterday. Is
no,
it the same?
so
It's something
no.
different.
No, it's something different.
Because
I mean,
there was some persons in the audience questioning about this, if it's possible that this is the same kind of device.
no, but it's no.
no.
But the
It's something
device
different.
is actually it's like a sort of pacemaker thing that's implanted in under your skin around here. And there's an app that just controls that device and sends different oscillations to this probe. So anyway, the piece has to do with so you hear these oscillations in throughout the whole piece. These kind of very deep, and these I used some of the frequencies that they use also with this device, and. I wanted to create this idea of multiple selves. So that's also that's an idea in the piece where the kind of waves of material which are being recorded, played back constantly, and this moment where he has these senses, and they're basically just movement senses, because I wanted to create a moment in the piece where there's a sort of idea of a kind of a presentation of physicality of the mechanics of his playing in a way. So he's it's also like looking at his body in a way, and just making this kind of the simple gestures to basically process the sound with kind of granular processing. So the piece, if I want to say something general about the piece, it's really let's say structurally, like many pieces I'm interested at the moment. Actually, Jurek mentioned it after the concert. He thought it's like a sort of installation type thing. A lot of my pieces are quite static in some way, and I'm interested in a sort of vertical development in pieces, so that things don't radically change over the structure, but it sort of evolves, grows in a vertical sense. So you get a kind of complexity with at some points in a kind of with many things happening at the same time, but the whole idea, it's just like one material which you're kind of circling around in different ways. So like when let's say, think of a concept of a piece and how to sort of work within music, I often like to think in terms of like a main idea that needs to be communicated. In this case, it was really like these oscillations, this alienation, and this kind of physical alienation, maybe and I just circle around these things in with this kind of static structures, let's say. Yeah.
So can we say that this is like a kind of memory that we have in our body? We memorize the gestures, especially when we're dealing with this really hard disease.
Yeah? I mean, yeah, I think it's it's more like an awareness, like a self-consciousness about the limitations of your body, and obviously we all experience these when something happens to our bodies, when we break something, or when we when it doesn't function as we all, and you become like sort of conscious of let's say the limitations of the body, and I think with this kind of procedures which can flip your body situation so quickly, because I mean, going back to this DBS surgery, these apps, literally you switch it on in the morning and it immediately changes your experience of of your body, whatever. So
Actually, this is what I also wanted to ask you about. Is this helping these people to deal with this disease, or this can help to brain work a little bit, or this is like in medical aspects, it's helping or it's analyzing?
Oh no, it's it's definitely helping. It just alleviates the tremors and alleviates the kind of freezes that somebody with like late Parkinson's disease can have. No, it's definitely I mean there are also drugs that do that, and most people who suffer this take also drugs with increasing, like say, dosage, you know, through whatever the 20, 30 years sometimes that they have it. No, it's like that's why I said in the future this kind of surgery is going to be quite common for other things other than Parkinson's disease. Yeah. So, and it's this kind of mystery of our brains that you know there's
Exactly.
there's you know with chemicals and with these kind of stimulations that it can really change our identity about who we are, you know, which is kind of, I find that aspect quite interesting, you know, like it's so fragile, our sense of identity. Yeah.
Cóż, podsumujmy na tym etapie. Rozpoczęliśmy jednak od utworu, który usłyszeli Państwo, usłyszała publiczność warszawsko-jesienna wczoraj. Nowa kompozycja, pierwsze wykonanie i niesamowite doświadczenie. Myślę, że będą pewnie z Państwa strony pytania o całe podłoże, ale też i pewnie o samą po prostu muzykę. Ja zaczęłam właśnie cytując Jamesa Parkinsona. Dla mnie osobowość, która przestała być trochę postacią, a zamieniła się po prostu w symbol, w którym opisuje się chorobę. I to też jest rodzaj jakiejś depersonalizacji, z którą możemy mieć do czynienia dość przewrotnie. Taka lista różnego typu z zespołów chorobowych jest nam znana i widzimy. To są konkretne postacie, które za tym wynalazkiem niezwykłym stoją. Więc zapytałam też o te koneksje. No i oczywiście o początek, w jaki sposób doszło do powstania utworu. Jeszcze kilka wątków na pewno przed nami, które musimy rozwikłać, ponieważ kompozytor zwrócił uwagę na razie na to, że sam w najbliższej swojej perspektywie nie doświadczył takiej osoby, która na przykład byłaby chora na zespół Parkinsona, ale w końcu poznał taką osobę, rozmawiał z nią i interesującym dla mnie było to, zapytałam, czy w jakiś sposób bezpośrednio to koresponduje z nawet postawą wczorajszego klarnecisty, który no, w jakiś sposób też używa technologii nowej. Czy to w jakiś sposób koresponduje z tym, jak to się ładnie po polsku dzisiaj mówi, backgroundem, prawda? Do powstania samej koncepcji, samego utworu. Tu mam wrażenie, nie wiem jak Państwo, że nie do końca jest jeszcze to czytelne i jasne, dowiemy się później. Jest tutaj aplikacja specjalna, która analizuje i stymuluje umysł ludzki i prowokuje do działania. I zapytałam też o to właśnie, czy jest to bardziej medyczne, czy to jest bardziej analizujące po prostu stan ciała i umysłu takiej osoby, która ma do czynienia z jakąś chorobą. No i okazuje się, że jedno i drugie, jak się okazuje, jest to pomocne i analizujące. Natomiast nie do końca jakby sama ta aplikacja była podstawą do stworzenia samego utworu, a więc to, co wczoraj widzieliśmy, co po prostu, czego używał solista w utworze, to są stymulatory ruchu, chyba tak się to po polsku mówi, prawda? Coś, co analizuje nasz gest, nasz ruch i w tym momencie oczywiście odpowiada też muzycznie, dźwiękowo. A więc podstawą muzyczną są zarejestrowane dźwięki, które ulegają właśnie później poprzez to urządzenie różnego typu no też depersonalizacją albo morfologicznie zmieniają nam po prostu dźwięk. Zapytałam też w związku z tym, czy to można rozumieć jako elementy, takie strzępy pamięci, elementy wspomnień po prostu, które są w naszym ciele zapisane w momencie, kiedy właśnie mamy do czynienia z tego typu chorobą atakującą całe nasze ciało. No i tutaj właśnie odpowiedź ze strony kompozytora padła, że jest to rodzaj właśnie takiego misterium, takiej mistyki naszego mózgu i naszego ciała i jego pamięci. Więc do utworu wrócimy. Bardzo, bardzo Państwa też proszę o pytania w tej materii, ale też innej. Okej. Little summary in Polish, of course, which is the background is really incredible. So thank you for that. But it's a lot of aspects if we're talking about your music. And I found many of them, so I need to cut myself a little bit even, because I found very interesting music as a language is important for you also.
Yeah.
And you have your presentation also about some other aspects. So let's start with this, okay? Let's begin with your presentation, and I think this open our conversation later.
I mean, thanks, Alexandra. So what I wanted to do was, I just gave this presentation about media scores, what I call media scores, a few months ago. And what I'll do is because we don't have so much time, I'll skip a lot of the theoretical aspects, the history, and I'll focus on some examples of my own work and recently. And then what I mean by media scores is the question came up, is normal standard print notation, is it finished? Have we reached the end of print technology? And that sort of question kept coming more and more to me, partly because I remember the time everybody was starting to use these, instead of paper on the music stand. It's like, well, since you're using one of these, why are we still using PDFs? Why do we still think in this kind of linear way? So now we've definitely gone beyond now this kind of Gutenberg sort of period, you could say. We're definitely fully in a sort of digital world in how we, communicate. I mean, there's still, obviously, print hasn't died out, and it's not going to die out immediately, but it's just a question, and I like to pose this question, especially to young composers, can you think of other ways of let's say, creating this idea of composition beyond what's the sort of normal linear conventions that we have. I mean, there's many reasons why we don't do that, because all these structures, the education, the musicians, everything around music, and the history of it, our historical, let's say, canon, is very much using the technology of print to create this kind of complexity. And we see also from complex scores how, this kind of complexity, you could say it reached its zenith in the end of the 20th century, but it enables a kind of music. So it's a sort of curiosity and question that I still have. Well, what if we leave that and try and let's say exploit what's possible with new media to create composition? So
this was also my question to you. It's my own private summary, because it's when I look at unmute, hands, orbital, even ask Ada. My question was, what do you mean the score now? It's like, you're dealing with this question all the time and you're playing a little bit. It's a kind of communication, and the background can be much different for everybody.
I mean, it's there's a great book by, probably some of you know it, Jacques Attali from the 70s, Noise, and he talks about the practice of composition in relation to society and politics. What it means, and it's quite nice. He says that sometimes music and historically has sort of tested out possible social connections or social structures, let's say, before they come about. But then, if I say, okay, if our current state of composition reflects the state of society, what does that say about our society if we have this very sort of hierarchical approach to music? So, like the composer, the score, the musicians, the conductor. It's all about hierarchy in some ways, So I wondered, if changing, our way of composition, changing, does that reflect on the society? Can that point to a different way of organizing kind of musical activity, let's say? So yeah, the question is, it's also for me, I'm interested in technology anyway, I've always been, but it's the question whether, it's also has to do with how I feel sometimes with musicians, because like in a situation like yesterday, as I say, I have to apologize because I'm going to talk about media scores, but yesterday it's really like a traditional score. But it's like you go to a rehearsal, I was actually surprised that everybody wanted to wear click tracks. There's a practical reason for that, but you didn't have to do it. But so that took away some of their freedom as well. But it's always the role of the composer in these situations. It's like, are they playing everything correctly? And I get in that mode. It's like, no, bar 33, and you want to sort of, and how I've experienced working media scores with musicians is totally different, because it's like, it's using their creativity much more. So it's like, you sort of give them you hand over the creativity to them to a large extent to create the composition. And I realize more and more I get more excited personally by being in those situations than being the controller. So that's why I feel as though I'm in between. I haven't totally sort of gone in that direction. I still have one foot in the traditional camp, but who knows,
I perfectly understand you in this. Więc za chwileczkę zobaczymy tutaj właśnie prezentację przygotowaną przez kompozytora, ale nasza rozmowa w tej chwili podążyła w ścieżkę taką, czym jest partytura, ponieważ też ja zadałam takie pytanie, kiedy przyglądam się kompozycjom Yannisa Unmoved Hands albo Orbital, na przykład, gdzie mówimy o partyturze wideo, o jakby interpretacji gestu również. Tu jest bardzo wiele współczynników, wiele aspektów. No to właśnie pytanie o to, czym jest partytura. I kompozytor właśnie wrócił tutaj do pewnej hierarchii i do pewnego porządku historycznego, w którym rzeczywiście jest idea, jest kompozytor. My to z naszego tutaj z naszej polskojęzycznej przestrzeni chyba najbardziej możemy porównać do dzieła Romana Ingardena, w jaki sposób tłumaczył nam, prawda, te kolejne teksty, w których istnieje dzieło, a zatem od idei przez kompozytora, który tworzy rodzaj komunikatu, partytury i przechodzi później to dalej w ręce interpretatora, a docelowo do nas, do publiczności. A zatem kim jest ten kompozytor? Tutaj mówi Yannis, że trochę takim kontrolerem jest, prawda, w jakimś sensie. No i w sumie nieco żartobliwie ujął również wczorajszą sytuację, bo jednak jest to partytura tradycyjna, tradycyjnie zapisana, ale jednak partytura, w której on nie czuje tego, żeby był takim właśnie kompozytorem kontrolującym za wszelką cenę całość przebiegu, że jednak ważne jest spotkanie z drugim człowiekiem, spotkanie z muzykiem i z jego kreatywnością, otwartością, i ona też prowokuje wiele i otwiera też na pewnego typu zmiany. Natomiast teraz zobaczymy jedną z ważniejszych aspektów twórczości Yannisa. This is also the background for your research. It's your doctoral dissertation.
Yeah, this is my doctoral. And I wanted to just to say that it's like my own interest in this kind of possibilities of media scores started when I was generally focused in my thesis on language firstly, but also in general other media and how other media collide with music.
It's a very interesting text, and I must say that Yannis published this on his website. So if you're interested
you can just download it.
You can just have this, and a huge part I read already.
Oh,
It's
wow.
very interesting because it's really huge work. It's like almost 300 pages, but the background is really fantastic. So yeah.
No,
Let's listen.
Yeah. So I mean, look, with a lot of the sort of scores that I'm going to talk about in my own work have this background in, let's say, Cage, for instance, Cage Variation series, this kind of, and later you can say Christian Wolff, Anea Lockwood, Christian Markley. So in the last, let's say, 30 years post-Cage, you could say, there's a lot of people exploring generative scores, interactive scores, graphic scores, animations, so as possibility for music. So, but my own interest came primarily from text, and in a lot of pieces, let's say in the 2000s, I was, and I still do actually work with text, so projected text, and I can give you an example from a piece where let's say the musicians have scores, like written out scores, and there's audience sees this text. And the reason why I started thinking about, let's share the score with the audience, is because in this kind of situation, you always had the audience reading one thing and the musicians reading another thing. And I found that kind of, more and more, I found that a kind of strange situation. But so this, I'll just play you an example of Dreams of the Blind. And this is a piece where it's kind of a metaphor. These are actually dreams of blind people, but it's more this metaphor of the blind dreamer. For me, was also a nice metaphor for how we, experience one medium through another. Like so there's this this kind of interchangeability between media to refer to something else. In the case of the blind dreamers, it was. We experience these as kind of image situations, and they might have experienced it as something else, something coming more from touch and hearing. But I thought it was an interesting metaphor with this kind of work. Sorry, you were gonna. I'll stop there. So, I mean, in this, you see that the kind of voice is substituted with everybody reading at the same time. So like that's a lot of what the thesis was about, is the inner voice, actually, like how, well, in this case, it's very clear that we're reading like internally, and the music is kind of somehow adding to this kind of voicing of our inner voice. But I was also generally interested in this kind of inner, how we use our voices to listen in general. Sorry, I'm not speaking on the mic properly. So that the voice is actually a major part in how we experience the world, the voice and the body, in fact. You know, like, and I think so. But in general, I found that I mean, I did many pieces like this. And of course, with that kind of piece, you need exact synchronization, and it's all about synchronization. But and actually, this picture is of another piece, an orchestra piece, where we also have text. And I realized, I wanted to do something that actually opens up let's say, the score with the audience. So actually, the text that we're reading and the score that the musicians are reading are one thing. And actually
So this means the instrumentalist plus the conductor and the audience is reading this in the same tempo, the same time, the same text.
Yeah.
And the orchestra needs to react to this. Yes, it's put together in the score. Like, they playing this when they see exactly this word. Yes.
Well, no, in most of the pieces, it's just they have a normal score and everything is synchronized often with click track, but sometimes with like sort of somebody cueing the words to the score.
Okay.
But I was going to play this one. The piece or let's say the example that I thought, actually karaoke is something that is both like a kind of score, and we see the text. So I was became interested in karaoke as a possible sort of format, you know, like that opens up like the score to the public. And of course, so that was actually, I was going to say, these are the pieces that I've written recently, like the media scores, that I can talk about some of these. And with karaoke, it was basically 6 songs, originally like the origins of, like they're relating to specific pop songs, but using the karaoke, let's say, iconography, which is often, you know, a word with a bouncing ball or a moving blue line, to have a kind of score for the musicians and a score for the audience.
Okay, so
yeah, so
in Polish a little bit. Mam nadzieję, że nie zgubiłam się we wszystkich wątkach. Rozpoczęliśmy od tego, co jest rzeczywiście dla kompozytora bardzo istotną, ważną rzeczą w jego badaniach naukowych i artystycznych, a więc czym jest tekst, czym jest język. Ta relacja pomiędzy tymi dwoma bardzo ważnymi zjawiskami. Zresztą tutaj powołuje się kompozytor też na fundamentem dzisiejszego spotkania jest jego praca doktorska, rzeczywiście imponująca, i sam kompozytor przeskoczył tę część historyczną i rozpoczął tutaj wątek od postaci Johna Cage'a, ale też po prostu tej nowojorskiej sceny współpracującej z Johnem Cage'em. It was John Cage and it was probably the New York School at the beginning.
New York School, like everybody.
And Alvin Lucier also, yes?
Or, a bit, yeah. Yeah, no, of course, a lot, yeah. But he has many text scores.
Czyli partytury graficzne, partytury używające języka bądź tekstu w dowolny sposób do interpretacji. To jest taki fundament, jedna z rzeczy ważna, która jest u podstaw, ale w samej pracy, muszę Państwu zdradzić tajemnicę, ten wywód jest poprowadzony tak naprawdę jeszcze od dzieł platońskich i arystotelesowskich. Ach, ten polski język. Cudowny. I tutaj rzeczywiście ten wywód jest dość niezwykły w perspektywie historycznej, więc jest to mocno ujęte właśnie w takim rozpoznaniu naukowym. No a tutaj rozpoczęliśmy właśnie od utworu, który już Państwo zapewne się zorientowali, jest też wynikiem analizy tego, w jaki sposób przerzucamy uwagę, uważność z jednego zmysłu na drugi w przypadku, kiedy jeden nie funkcjonuje, a więc jest to obserwowanie osób niewidomych i stało się to podstawą właśnie dla stworzenia tamtej partytury. Ja zapytałam, czy to jest tak, że publiczność czyta tekst, który jest na ekranie, i orkiestra również i trzeba reagować po prostu tak jakby po stronie muzyków jest ta odpowiedzialność za reakcję w odpowiednim momencie. Okazuje się, że nie, że jest to po prostu uporządkowane. Partytura jest tradycyjna, więc tempo i wszystkie zagadnienia muzyczne są podporządkowane do projekcji wideo. Widzieliście Państwo też listę kompozycji. Polecam serdecznej uwadze te utwory, które tutaj były wymienione właśnie przed chwileczką w prezentacji, zajmujące się tym tematem. A więc tekst bardziej postawiony w tej sytuacji, kiedy czytamy, po prostu pierwszy raz rozpoznajemy tekst, rozpoznajemy w ogóle narrację jako taką, a nie mówimy jeszcze o interpretacji.
Yeah, so and I was just playing in the background here, like some of the scores to karaoke etudes. Let me just go back to the and in a way the fact that, and I realized after doing this piece, the fact that it's relatively open. Score, it can be played in many different ways, and for instance, this is a nice version where two Canadian groups decided to do it as kind of a battle, like kind of like these kind of rap battles or battles, so each soloist, they had two of the same instrument, and it was kind of something, and I realized, oh, what a great idea! I won't play example, but so this kind of openness is something that I began to think actually it's really like a bonus for the composer, and it's much like I think that when my experience of playing in a group myself, actually with Gareth and some other musicians, Anne LeBerge and Ryan Niefenhout, we have a 6-piece group called Maze, and we do a lot of open scores, like a lot of the scores from the 60s and beyond, and also we worked with, in fact, many of these composers who have influenced me, I think.
So it's a kind of experience for you also,
yeah.
From this practical side.
Yeah,
yes?
So to see how much creativity can be given by the musician in realizing an idea. So if I go on, the next piece that that was also a real breakthrough for me was this app score. So as I said before, I really wanted to make a score that is really, for tablets, and it's a piece called Onirikon, and it's based on I think 12th or 11th century book. It's a Byzantine book, which is a dream manual. Back in those days, they would create dream manuals, so manuals that would interpret your dreams, because dreams, for I think for them in this kind of religious sort of cultures, have to do with foretelling the future. So like there were these kind of manuals where if you dream of this, it means this will happen. So I used this. I used this book. So I encoded the whole book into an app, so you can either read it, you can play it, and use it as a score. And I'll just show you. I'll just show you an example. You can download it for free. It's only iOS, unfortunately, but.
A tutaj ciekawe też, że właśnie kompozytor łączy swoje doświadczenie jako muzyka, wykonawcy, współpracującego z różnego typu grupami i jest w to włączony oczywiście też aspekt pewnej improwizacji, kreatywności, bycia otwartym do interpretacji właśnie poszczególnych partytur. Tam przed chwileczką widzieliście Państwo też doświadczenie, kiedy mówił o dwóch grupach kanadyjskich, które postanowiły na zasadzie nieco rywalizacji, gry albo wręcz walki zinterpretować jedną z partytur. A tutaj mamy partyturę, która jest również w postaci aplikacji możliwą do ściągnięcia i jest oparta na XII-wiecznej księdze, która w różnych aspektach tłumaczy jako księga snów po prostu, prawda, w różnego typu odsłonach i w różnych rozumieniach, włączywszy też i religijne, ale nie tylko.
Bad for all others. That's in the dream. So you can let's say scroll through, read it, and then when you let go, it picks a random word and it encodes it into these notes.
And it's, can we use a microphone because it's for the recording?
Sorry.
Important.
It encodes the letters into notes and basically creates phrases. And when I first had the idea, I made several rules. I made about 10 rules about how you interpret, let's say, what's here and the best way to perform it. But actually, afterwards, I also dropped those rules. I thought, it's actually nice to present this sort of kind of puzzle, like to the musicians, and they find their own way of performing it. And what's also nice is that it's also an instrument, so you can. I mean, so now I've got rid of that word accidentally. Should have just done one finger. You can, let's say, bend the notes. So it creates also nice sort of. Creates a nice interaction with the rest of the audience. Anyway, so this is the Onirikon, and I won't play that. So this is actually my group that we're playing a version of it in Berlin, and sorry. Yeah, I can play you in a recording, I think here. Wait. Maybe turn it down a bit. Yeah. So when we recorded it, for instance, with the group, I said, whenever a word gets fully formed, you can say the word quietly to yourself. So that's also what you hear sometimes. The way technically the way the words are encoded into notes, I use this kind of fixed translation. So the most common letters have the most consonant relation. So so let's say E's and T's and N's and S's, and they might be really very much based around E minor, let's say E. Let's say the odd letters like K, Q, Z, whatever, they're very dissonant. So you get this you end up getting this kind of relatively harmonious sort of ambient sort of sound world.
So I understand how the score works, but I'm still unsure how were they supposed to interpret the score, because each person had their own instrument.
Yeah.
I understand.
Julia, możesz to powiedzieć do mikrofonu.
Sorry, so I'll repeat my question. So I understand how the score is supposed to work, but I understand each instrumentalist is with its own instrument.
Yeah.
And how are they supposed to interpret the duration of the notes? Because, for instance, I see that there is, I think, is that saxophone on the left?
Yeah, the bass clarinet.
So, yeah, it's a bass clarinet.
Yeah.
I couldn't see. So it's a one-note instrument. How, if on the score there seems to appear like more than one note, how are they supposed to choose? What are the rules?
No. So I mean, it's let's say if I go back to the score. So here I've got like E, E, A, E. So and actually that's A. So I want them to make phrases with that, also relating to the line. So it might be like E, E, A, E. You know, they'll make a boo, ba, boo, boo, and then boo, ba, boo. They'll keep repeating it, and then another note might come in. They might have to squeeze it in. So it's this idea of constantly evolving melodies, and the phrasing is. So I write here, like. It's like play notes as they come, repeat notes if no change. Think of stress and phrasing as if you're articulating the words. So that's another thing, you know, like it's this kind of how they phrase the line. So it's as if they're trying to articulate something. And yeah, so these actually, these are the rules that I sort of wrote like when I first did it. But as I said, now it's nice to just share the piece without necessarily saying you have to do this. You can do whatever you want, and I find that interesting, you know. So, yeah.
Czyli tutaj mamy ciekawy przykład właśnie pewnej takiej dowolności, prawda? Możemy wybrać sobie z tego katalogu możliwości. Szczególnie budzi moje zainteresowanie myślenie o stresie, na przykład, jeden z punktów, tak? Więc sposób naturalny, w jaki mamy zareagować. I tutaj na tym dodatkowym ekranie mogliśmy zobaczyć, w jaki sposób też łączyć, prawda, różnego typu elementy i przekształcać je w melodię, więc rzeczywiście wymaga to kreatywności od samego wykonawcy i na pewno też jego jakiegoś stanu psychofizycznego, w jaki sposób on reaguje, a też pamięci, prawda, doświadczenia, które się w to włącza z pewnością.
And can I just ask, what's supposed to be the duration of the piece?
It doesn't. There's no duration.
Yeah,
that's a lot of these pieces they can
of
last.
Course.
Yeah, like
it could last for hours. It could be like more of a like come in and out situation.
Yeah,
as well.
exactly. And it's actually like I can sort of skip to that piece as well now. Like it's something that I interested more and more in like longer durational experiences anyway. But
Auf den 7 Tagen, so we can stay for a week.
Yeah,
and play,
Oh, that's true. Yeah. But I mean, this was. I won't go too deeply into this, but this was another piece based on. It was a commission to do something around the commemoration of the First World War. So this was based on code books, American code book, which became this score, a German code book, which became this score, and English one, and it's basically 3 scores. I'm not going to play this because I think we don't have so much time, and I wanted to show another piece. But again, that's a piece. There's 3 scores, and I say, well, you can play the 3 scores at the same time, which I've done it with my group, or you can play as movements, one at a time, and that also brings a different puzzle. Like, how do we combine these 3 movements? And I find that interesting, the kind of results you get out of that. This is a piece I presented last autumn in Warsaw in the Ad Libitum Festival, because I made it we made it about 5-6 years ago with Konrad Smolenski, this great Polish sound artist, who and we sort of I performed in one of his installations, the famous installation he had with the bells. I forgot the name of it. He showed in the Biennale about 8 years ago, I think. Anyway, we made this piece together, and it's the theme trackers. It's this theme that's actually I've made already 4 pieces about it, and I'm making another one now. It's like it's an old myth. It's a play by Sophocles, which is only half complete or half found, and it's about the discovery of music. So. The story goes. It's about the trackers are looking for the satyrs are looking for Apollo's lost cows, and they come to a cave and they hear this really strange sound inside the cave, and they're frightened by it because they've never heard that sound before, and that sound is actually Hermes building and tuning a lyre from the cow hide and the tortoise shell. So it's this idea about the invention of music.
Okay, it's a challenge for me right now.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, so the little pause. Mieliśmy przed chwileczką do czynienia z sytuacją, kiedy kompozytor mówi o użyciu na przykład partytury, 3 partytur, które mogą być symultanicznie wykonywane, mogą być osobno wykonywane, to w poprzednim utworze. Utwór, który też był wykonywany rok temu na festiwalu Ad Libitum, a więc festiwalu dedykowanemu, który dedykuje swoją tożsamość całą muzyce improwizowanej, i to przy współpracy z również artystą polskim, Konradem Smoleńskim, była przygotowana ta partytura. I tutaj teraz jeszcze mamy wątek, który jest, myślę, w twórczości w ogóle kompozytora bardzo ważny. To też, nie ukrywam, pytanie, może to będzie ze strony państwa też pytanie, ale moje pytanie o mitologię, która wraca bardzo często. No i właśnie okazuje się, że jest po raz kolejny powrót do mitologii. Mamy satyra, który jest zaskoczony przez dźwięk bardzo natarczywy i próbuje ten dźwięk odnaleźć. Nie wiem, czy dobrze zapamiętałam całą opowieść, ale jest to o odnalezioną historię, w oparciu o odnalezioną historię Sofoklesa, a więc widać, że jednak tradycja i też powroty do mitów, do twórczości antycznej są obecne. Jeśli państwo całej twórczości nie znają Kyriakidesa, to proszę mi wierzyć, że tak jest, że to jest częsty temat, który właśnie powraca u niego, ale też zapytamy kompozytora o to.
Yeah, so I'm just playing a bit of the video, but the
So it's Sophocles and it's satire.
That's the idea that informs a lot of some of these pieces. But in this case, what happens is there's a kind of situation, like I'll put the diagram, where there's 5 speakers. I mean, Conrad, he made this kind of setup because he's very much interested in these kind of you could say the speakers, this sort of the meaning they have as a kind of rock music thing. And we've also worked with this, what I call a deconstructed drum set. So you have drum thing that's spread out throughout the whole space. A lot of like smoke, and lights. So it's like Konrad really created the situation, and also because he comes from the sort of art practice, fine art world. For him, like this idea of making an installation that just lasts the whole day is normal.
So it's like speakers and loudspeakers are also instruments.
Yeah.
This is the new idea that comes with electronic music and also with playing at concerts.
And the musicians come in and out playing with and there's a soundtrack which plays through the whole system, changing over like many hours. And so and I made this score which is projected on the ground. So this is like this idea of the trackers. So it's like, so the musicians are like trackers, like the satyrs in this kind of space, looking for these fragments of traces that lead them to music. It's like more like that's the metaphorical idea.
A więc tu widzimy linię, którymi ten satyr podąża, a cała sytuacja, którą państwo widzieliście na poprzednim rzucie ekranu, to jest właśnie przygotowywanie tej przestrzeni dla muzyków poprzez 5 różnych stanowisk. I Konrad Smoleński jest człowiekiem, który też pracuje z muzykami zorientowanymi bardziej na muzykę rockową, a używa bardzo dużo też różnego typu dymów, dymiarek i przygotowuje w ten sposób przestrzeń. Ja też zapytałam o to, czy to wynika też z pewnej już, można powiedzieć, tradycji używania mikrofonów, ale też używania monitorów jako po prostu instrumentów tej przestrzeni. I okazuje się, że tak, że w tym rzecz, aby taką przestrzeń wykreować. Muzycy się tymi liniami właśnie poruszają. We could see letters also on the ground, like C, F, G. Is this a notes?
Yes,
or,
those are notes. It's like, so they relate to kind of tonalities that's being generated. And then the musicians are also asked to interact with the lines crossing over several objects. And it's kind of also open. And there's no rules about how loud or how soft or anything they play. It's just but in a whole, like we did it for 4 hours in the ad libitum. And it just really develops on its own, which is quite beautiful. Like it's sort of, the musicians feel like, okay, now we need to really play and make a noise. Sometimes they keep, more subtle. So it's. I find it interesting how, with the more that you create a situation and then the musicians react to it, which I find quite beautiful.
Are you using also in real time recorded session or instrumentalists playing in the same time and then to play this simultaneously with them or no?
In this case,
No.
like the what I created in the soundtrack was, you can sort of hear it, and there are these kind of very deep sine tones that would be moving between, like bell kind of sounds that would be moved from all the speakers, and these kind of noise elements which would come in and out. But so it's actually, in the end, it's this quite meditative situation, but very loud also. Like so, it's like kind of very low tones which we don't hear here.
Czyli tu jest przygotowana ścieżka dźwiękowa, a nie ma takiej sytuacji, ja zapytałam o to, czy jest włączona sytuacja, w której na żywo nagrywani są muzycy i na przykład jakiejś redefinicji to nagranie podlega resyntezie i jest odtwarzane, a więc nie, tylko jest właśnie to podłoże, które Państwo częściowo możecie usłyszeć i muzycy na żywo wykonujący i poruszający się po tych ścieżkach z tym umownym, mitologicznym satyrem.
Gareth again. He's everywhere. Okay, so and another piece a bit related to this theme. It's a piece called Wave Shaper, and it's also about I was inspired by the actual, really going into this idea of this sine wave. Wave shaping is something in synthesis where if you have a sine wave, which is this, if you start bending, shaping the sine wave, you start hearing these kind of weird, beautiful overtones in the piece. So I was using a synthesizer, created a kind of these weird oscillations. These weird shapes. You see them on the oscilloscope, and I made a scores of these sounds. And I mean, the score looks like this. This might be quite loud, so careful. It's okay. And the score is this sound, the wave, plus these notes, and there's long notes and there's short notes, and that's it. So again, it's for iPad, and the musicians have each one has something like 16 of these like little films which come up, and they can cue them themselves at any point, and you have a kind of like a counterpoint with all these. Each person has different films, and I'll play a recording, and they have to make phrases out of these short notes and these long notes. That's the idea. So the long notes, the short notes are kind of grace notes to the long notes, but also react to the waves that are coming on their parts, as you see. This was a video we made for the radio during COVID. So they made a video. They put these they made a composite of all the waves on the thing. I don't know why. So this is an example actually of a score which it's quite precise in a way because the notes are quite defined, but the way they play it, the order is kind of open, and I think it's something that I would say it's characteristic of the stuff I do, which is I like to be in control of the notes of tonality. I think I find that it's a much harder thing to be totally open with. But it's much more free in how timings and let's say expressive aspects. I leave that totally open.
So partly it's control improvisation.
Yeah, I mean
creativity.
That's the thing. It's like this. There's always this debate about how much improvisation is it, and according to John Cage, there isn't any. There shouldn't be improvisation with this. And but on the other hand, working with improvisers, they're more free. They feel more sort of comfortable working within these rules. Let's say, but I think it's often musicians say it's improvisation, but I think for me, improvisation is something totally different. Improvisation is really much freer. Let's say, and this is following certain rules, but having an openness in some ways. You wanted to ask?
Yes, I have a question.
Yeah.
Because you said that the musicians should also react to the sign shifting that is happening on their score. In what way should they adapt to that? How do you interpret?
It's a good question, yeah, because it's a bit vague. But I want, firstly, they hear the sound coming from the iPad also. But I want them to mostly in intensity, in dynamics. But intensity can also be kind of speed, urgency. But that's the thing. It's a bit vague, and
But what you said made a lot of sense. Yeah. I like it. It sounded very, very interesting. And what was the process of choosing the notes for each of the videos? Did you have a more narrow span of notes that you wanted to choose for it to sound more consonant, perhaps?
Yeah. So what I do actually in the composition process. Being an old school composer, also I really wrote a score with how the piece starts, how it opens up, the tonalities. It sort of goes through also modulations of some sort. So there is a sort of order, and the musicians have to play the videos in an order, but the timing where they put them on is kind of free. So it's kind of controlled, the sort of general shift in tonalities, but not on a micro level, because it can be, then sometimes you might get dissonances because, something I hadn't, so I mean, that's all fine, but that's how I really sort of pre-compose the order. Yeah.
And what will happen if one of the instrumentalists finished before the rest, significantly
it does
before?
happen. That's what happens in the end of the piece. It becomes a solo.
Fades out.
Yeah.
Kind of.
No, because they have to just finish the video. So So like, maybe one person has to play 2 videos, but on their own, which is okay, yeah.
That's very interesting. I like your openness to like all the results that could happen. That
I mean, it's
refreshing.
that's funny because it's like it is a real shift because I keep having to tell myself like, it's okay, it can happen like this, and sometimes you get better or worse performances, and you just have to accept it. It is what it is, because in some, especially when I go to rehearsals and I hear the musicians, like what they do with it, sometimes I get goosebumps because it's like, wow, I never expected this, and it's kind of, for me, it's nice to have that possibility, Yeah.
It looks like it's really interesting for you since years to be between mimesis and narrative. Yes, that's what you also put, because it depends about what we're talking. This means to me how you choose the music material, but how long we're going to be talking and what we create at the end. It depends on this person who's speaking, using the instruments or
I mean, what's interesting is, like what I said before, sometimes with the concept of a piece, the things that are communicated to an audience, sometimes I want that to be really clear. So, like clear that, this piece is, about these kind of themes. So you can think about that. I mean, you will think about that. So there is this sort of cognitive, let's say, narrative layer in the piece that has to do with the concept. Or like also this piece, for instance, that we can talk about in a sec, that has a clear concept and you understand what it is. But whatever like micro things are happening in the piece, it's like, you don't have to read them necessarily in a narrative way. Okay, the bass clarinet player suddenly has a solo. What does that mean? That's just a sort of, you've created a kind of world where things can happen, and things can happen that you don't expect. And that's, and like, I mean, if I talk about this piece, it's. This piece was a COVID piece. It was written like really in the first part during lockdown, and because my studio is next to the ring road of Amsterdam, so I used to go from my house to the studio like during COVID, sneak sometimes, not really loud. No, in Amsterdam actually you were allowed. and it was so beautiful. It was in a sense like this kind of dual thing. COVID was horrible, but at the same time, we experienced some things which were sort of quite special, like quite interesting. Also, some positive, some negative as well. But the one of the interesting things was this kind of emptiness of the city. So within the few months of COVID, I went around the whole ring road. Like I cycled, walked, and just made these kind of tableaus of the places around the ring road. And so this is an example of like somewhere near in the north of Amsterdam. And so this is, again, it's a score, it's a fixed score, but there's this kind of generative element, which are the kites, what I call the kites, these white sort of things. So the score is, you see this kind of glitched tableaus of the city, you hear the sound. And then the musicians, there's a microphone in the center, and the musicians would go up to the microphone and not play a solo, but play in the mic. And that microphone would generate so the amplitude of, if they play loudly, you would get big kites. If you play softly, you get small kites. And then the other musicians would respond to the kites. And how they would respond, was they would take one of the notes that appears there and like attach it to a kite. And again, it's totally up to them. They would like modulate or manipulate the sound depending on the movement of the kite. We invented several rules for that, but it's also open for the. So there's this kind of feedback system, interactive thing going on with the musicians. I'll just play a bit. But going back to your question about the mimetic and the narrative aspect, in this case, there is this kind of narrative aspect, which is it's going around the ring road of Amsterdam, you know, and we understand COVID, we can relate to that. Oh yeah, I was there. I know that, you know, like this was what it was like. But it's also about there's hardly any humans, let's say, in the images. A few times, a lot of animals, a lot of, you know, like other things. But so there's that narrative element, and then you could say the mimetic. You know, what are the musicians? Is their function in the piece? You know, they're acting as musicians, so they're creating let's say, the atmosphere, the mood, but they're also belong a bit to this landscape also. So we can't help but seeing the musicians or the people, you know, as part of this sort of landscape.
Tu mamy przykład utworu, który powstał w okresie lockdownu. Wydaje mi się, że można powiedzieć, że jest to taka szczytowa forma w przypadku tego kompozytora, która mówi o właśnie też jednym z zjawisk, o których pisał już też w swoich tekstach naukowych, o tym namyśle, na ile właśnie praca z tekstem, z językiem jest mimetyczną, a na ile jest narracyjną. I tu się udało połączyć te dwa aspekty. Tak jak mówiłam wcześniej, gdzieś tam platoński i arystotelesowska wizja, która się tutaj łączy, ponieważ kompozytor mówi, że rzeczywiście z jednej strony każdy doświadczył z nas bycia w tym okresie lockdownu i każdy w jakiś sposób indywidualny może się odnieść do tego zjawiska, więc to by była bardziej ta mimetyczna strona, ale z drugiej strony byliśmy jako wykonawcy, jesteśmy częścią tego obrazu, pełnią tego, co tutaj widzimy. Ponieważ podstawą były this was a pictures, photos that you made, or little videos. It's videos.
Yeah, so each video is maybe, let's say, 20 seconds, half a minute, like, no, just with my phone, not anything like that.
20-30 sekundowe, krótkie materiały wideo, które zostały nagrane właśnie w czasie lockdownu, gdzie kompozytor musiał po prostu przejść ze swojego domu, albo jak mówi, nawet wręcz się tak troszeczkę prześlizgnąć do swojego studia i w tej drodze właśnie do studia obserwować też naturę, przyrodę, ale też brzmienie miasta i jego kolory. Zatem zadaniem tutaj dla muzyków jest na przykład też zbliżanie się do jednego mikrofonu, i ten mikrofon reaguje też w odpowiedni sposób, jakby, prawda, budzi pewnego typu reakcję na to, w jaki sposób muzyk gra. Natomiast znowu podobna sytuacja. Reguły postępowania muzycznego są ściśle określone. Natomiast tempo, czas, sposób wykonania jest bardziej otwarty.
So yeah, so you have these slowly changing notes that they can pick. We're hearing actually a guitar also playing on the microphone, so he's generating these kites. And you notice that there's a slight glitch in each picture, you know, like, and I wanted to have this kind of element where it's not really, this kind of surreal aspect.
And also connecting all of these videos, yes?
Yeah. So you can see also from the notes that I'm also very much trying to control the modality, the tonality of the.
That's what I already said.
Yeah. So also during, I don't know if you can see that really well, but there's because I'm also more interested in melodic aspects again, so I also composed these 16 or so melodies, and I asked the musicians actually memorize one or two melodies. Mm-hmm. So they're not reading from music, but they just have to just choose a melody and memorize it, so that and when the number comes up on the thing, it's when they can play the melody within, let's say, a frame of, let's say, a minute or two. Mm-hmm. So this is also, again, a way of like sneaking in a kind of compositional thing. But I somehow like the idea like of internalizing a melody. It still, for me, gets away from like the score, and they could play the melody however they like. Mm-hmm. It's funny. I once did it.
But they need to memorize one.
One, yeah,
they
one or
need
two.
To choose. Okay.
I did it like last year when I was touring in Canada, and there was one musician who learned all of them. It's like, and I said, you didn't have to learn all of it. He said, no, it's okay. I wanted to.
A więc tutaj pomiędzy zasadami i regułami jest jedna, że trzeba zapamiętać przynajmniej jedną z tych melodii, która jest tutaj przez kompozytora przygotowana. Natomiast podczas wizyty właśnie w jednym miejscu jeden z odtwórców, interpretatorów nauczył się wszystkich, więc zaskoczenie było dla kompozytora.
This is from a rehearsal, actually with another group in Canada, like a group from GGRIL from Quebec. This is a rehearsal, so we were figuring out, because this piece I want the musicians to use the whole space, to move anywhere in the space. So the guitarist now is playing one of the melodies. And the violinist she's triggering the kites on the microphone.
Więc to jest sytuacja próby i tutaj Państwo widzicie ten materiał wideo prezentowany. Ten taki symboliczny, oniryczny znak, który się porusza na wideo, jest grany. It's a violin now, yeah? Więc altówka jakby powoduje ruch tego nie wiem jak ten kształt nazwać, ale rzeczywiście tego kształtu, który tam wędruje sobie po materiale wideo. A jedna z melodii była przed chwileczką grana przez gitarę akurat, czyli takie odszukiwanie zagubionych melodii trochę tutaj mamy w tym materiale, która w niesamowity sposób się wpisuje chyba w pejzaż właśnie wielu materiałów wideo, które nagrywaliśmy podczas lockdownu, prawda? Trochę tak jest. So I said that, it's like a kind of lost melodies that we were trying to find when we were all making pictures, or, we record the sounds or making video during the lockdown and having sometimes long walk by ourselves.
Yeah,
It was different in many countries, but in Poland we have this period when we couldn't move outside for long walks. Even in a forest, we use masks, so listen the nature.
That's a nice way of putting it. There was definitely this kind of introverted.
So I'm curious how it's going to be. It's a symbolic piece for the next generations.
Well, I thought of that
coming
because
from that time.
I think when was the last time it was performed? Recently, somewhere, in Holland, and I felt like, I wonder what people will think of this. If it's like, COVID, forget it. I don't want to see a COVID piece anymore. Or if it's like this, that happened.
That happened, yeah. Mm-hmm. Great.
If I may, I have two questions regarding the technicalities, basically. Yeah. So one, do you have an imposed order of the instrumentalist that should come up to the microphone?
No.
So it's like they between them they just agree on that. Okay.
And actually, this group is like, it was really nice to do it with this group because it's like there's 15 or so, 16 musicians. They're all improvisers, so they're really used to just being free with this. Like, and it was nice to have a big group because they all decided, I'm going to take this function now. I'm going to take this function. So it was that was.
And did they choose the melodies that they had to learn by heart at random, or did they select so that no melody is repeated amongst two instrumentalists?
I think, like, you could see, like, some of them have got stanzas because this is the rehearsal and they're still figuring it out. I think in the rehearsal they tested out which melodies they wanted to do. And actually sometimes it was nice then there was like 2 or 3 people playing the same melody, which was also nice. I didn't think of that and I thought, oh yeah, that's really nice. So as I said, all these kind of nice surprises. Musicians come up with great ideas, and like if I'm there, they always ask me, can I do this? And I'm like, yeah, sure. I mean, sometimes I said no, maybe not. But,
and just one last question regarding the notes that appear on the screen. The instrumentalists were supposed to choose just one and stick with that until it disappeared.
Yes.
Or
that's. I mean, you're really going to the technicality because it's actually one of the big questions, which I still don't know the answer to because it's like I said, pick the note and keep it until the kite is gone. So sometimes the note goes, but the kite is still there. So they ask me, should I still play the note? And I'm like, depends how long the kite is there, because it's nice if it really sticks to the kite, but at the same time, that creates kind of, if it's too slow, then I said I'll leave it up to your discretion. If you think, okay, I've had enough of this note, stop playing the note. But yeah, it's like a. I mean, actually, I wanted to first put the note on the kite, but because I programmed it in Java, this whole kite thing, and I just didn't like how it looked. I just thought it looks a bit messy. So then I decided to keep it just in a strip, and keep it clean in the image.
And what about the dynamics and the crescendos and decrescendos?
Yeah, and that's also another good question because the piece lasts about 25 minutes. So it needs to be shaped, actually, because there are these changes, but, And the dynamics in a way shaped by if nobody's playing on the microphone, there's no kites, nobody's supposed to be playing. If somebody's playing a lot and they're triggering, 30, 40 kites, then it sort of naturally gives the idea that there should be a lot of activity, it should be loud. But that has to be regulated by the musicians. So I don't say anything about that. So in rehearsals that I've gone also with my group, I try to say, look, we have to be aware of the shape, not to give a classic golden section thing or anything, but just to be aware of creating dynamics. Because because it is a fixed time length, we might come away thinking this is boring, or this is the tension's really sagging now, and it can lead to better or worse experiences of the structure of the piece. So it's one of these things that you realize during rehearsal and I like it that the musicians have to take responsibility for that. So yeah.
Because there's also an electronic part.
Yeah.
And it's already programmed. It's not live electronics. So it already imposes a certain shape, doesn't it?
Exactly, yeah.
Was it maybe a good idea for them to follow the electronic part, or were they supposed to just work on it independently?
I think it's one of those things that, because generally the electronics part, it's quite flat. It's not hugely dynamic. There are moments. Sometimes it's you hear the soundtrack, the sort of field recording of the space. Sometimes it's processed. Sometimes I use resonators to bring out the kind of tonality also of the that's coming. And
So it functioned more as a background, as a base layer.
It's kind of a background, but I must admit that in the performances that I've done, I've been controlling the volume of the soundtrack. So if I feel as though something's happening, I might sort of go with it. So I'm acting a bit like a musician also. But yeah, I mean, you're really thinking of it's all of those questions are questions that musicians have to discuss, and that's what it's really nice to have those discussions with a group, you know, like about how do we play this piece and the problems and how to solve those problems and, you know, those kind of things. Yeah.
Yeah, can we make a little summary from your from your questions, please?
I should make the summary. Dobrze, bo zadałam parę pytań, przede wszystkim a propos tego, jak instrumentaliści powinni dobierać dźwięki, które są wypisane na dole na tym pasku. I dostałam odpowiedź, że tak naprawdę nie powinni zmieniać między tymi dźwiękami, które są napisane, powinni obrać jeden i trwać z tym dźwiękiem albo aż dźwięk zniknie, albo aż latawiec, który obrali, zniknie. W zależności tutaj już intuicyjnie działając, jak to improwizatorzy potrafią w dodatku bardzo sensownie zrobić. Pytałam również o warstwę elektroniki i o to, jak to się ma do dynamiki, do warstwy dynamicznej wśród instrumentalistów. Czy powinni się tym sugerować, bo jest warstwa elektroniki, która nie jest obrabiana na żywo, tylko jest już nagrana uprzednio. Dostałam odpowiedź, że jest ona dość statyczna. Zmiany dynamiczne nie są zbyt drastyczne, więc one też nie sugerują za bardzo zmiany i że to instrumentaliści między sobą powinni bardziej skupić się na kształtowaniu utworu, bo trwa on 25 minut, więc żeby jakiś kształt mu nadawać. Też kompozytor powiedział, jak przy tych wykonaniach, przy których on był, on manipulował trochę właśnie głośnością, kiedy wyczuwał, że coś trzeba pociągnąć do przodu, czy coś zredukować, więc tutaj też miał swój wkład. Nie wiem, co jeszcze zapytałam.
Bo to jest dosyć takie naturalne, prawda? W sytuacji improwizacji jednak jakiś lider czasami musi być, żeby pomóc. Tak, bardzo dziękuję.
Już wiem. I że kolejność instrumentalistów podchodząca do mikrofonu nie była ustalona odgórnie, tylko że to też między sobą musieli intuicyjnie tutaj
Ale jak
dobierać.
widać, budowanie jakichś kontrapunktów i melodii jest nadal bardzo ważne i istotne, bardziej aniżeli inne aspekty i jakby pewna ciągłość taka, prawda, narracyjna, czy też tempo wykonywania całości. Dobrze, dziękuję bardzo. Okay, is there any question?
Yes, I'd like to ask a question. Like, you seem to really be very open with the outcome of the pieces. You leave a lot of room for the performance. However, like with this tradition of graphic scores and so on, there is also this story of, I don't know, like developing languages, developing these ways of translating them into performances, into music. You seem to be like really engaged in this process with the performance. Do you ever leave this situation like truly open, provide a score without the instructions?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, I mean, it has happened. And you know, like for whatever reason, I can't be there, or somebody wants to play it, and like they tell me afterwards that they played it. You know, these kind of things. So it's not. I mean, some of the pieces they have to contact me for me to send them. Some of the pieces they find, you know, like this is just online.
Yeah, but like, so, do you find that those instructions are kind of part of the score?
Yes. I mean, that's the thing. There's really an art to writing those instructions, and John Cage is really a good example of that, because the way he words things, it's very open, but you get the sense, I think he means this specifically, or you know, there is really an art to that, and I do have like an instruction, but it's a question of how open to keep it, how very specific to keep to do it, what's important for me that makes the piece really still a piece. I mean that's for me the most important question, and sometimes I don't know that until I've seen the piece or I've worked with the piece with my own group, which is kind of like interesting because. All those questions that you asked, you only discover during rehearsals, and then you realize, okay, this is important to put in the score because, yeah, as I said, in general, I am very open, but at the same time, I would also think a performance might be totally not what I would want, and I have to, it's a bit of a challenge to myself then to think, okay, I have to accept it, or I should have been more clear in the instructions, or, yeah.
Czyli, jak rozumiem, pana pytanie skupione było przede wszystkim wokół tego zagadnienia otwartości na wszelkiego typu wpływy ze strony muzyków z zewnątrz, którzy wykonują, prawda? I czy też te instrukcje, które są właśnie ważne dla zbudowania całości.
Właśnie bardziej zastanawiałem się nad tym, co stanowi jakby jeszcze część tej partytury w tym współczesnym rozumieniu. Czyli czy są nią te elementy na przykład wizualne, wideo zapewnione przez kompozytora, czy również język translacji tego na działania muzyków i jakby w jakim stopniu tutaj to powinno być już ściśle określone na starcie. No?
Tak, no i kompozytor właśnie wspomniał między innymi Johna Cage'a jako mistrza w konstruowaniu tego typu instrukcji. Natomiast też podkreślił, że jest to dla niego też wyzwanie i zadanie, aby samemu też jakby doskonalić tą formę komunikacji, prawda? Jeśli chce faktycznie uzyskać takie jakości, a nie inne. Thank you.
Okay, I mean, I don't know if there's time. I wanted to show two other pieces, I'll maybe go briefly. One is Hands, which is like using 3D animation of these hands. So this is actually the score. I have a video like this, and each hand has a tonality and a rhythm and a pulse, let's say. So you see and actually there is a score which is, there's about 40 or 50 hands throughout the piece, and I write the actual tonality of each one. So the musicians, again, a bit like the memory thing, they pick like, I'm going to play hand 23, 17, 59, and they memorize okay, it's D, C sharp, whatever. And then, so I've actually only done the piece once because the person who commissioned it, we haven't had a chance to perform it yet, but I workshopped it in Lucerne with some students there in the academy. And it was actually really instructive for me to understand, again, what is possible in the piece. So this is a fragment of I also said, move around, a bit when you play. I don't know if I want that or not eventually, but like... They use their ear a lot, actually, I realized, rather than looking at So in rehearsal, they understand the kind of shape, but then in the end, they're focusing on the sound. Yeah, so this one is again, it's surprising that like in terms of the meaning you get. Sometimes it's grotesque, especially towards the end, you get really weird things. Sometimes it's just funny. Sometimes it's there's many different emotions which can come out of it, and I was surprised by that. And also, again, I said in the beginning, I thought they have to synchronize exactly, whomp, whomp. But I realized, it's actually nice if there's a dialogue. So it doesn't have to be synchronized, but they can see it and they can respond to it. So it's yeah.
They need to choose one gesture. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's like and I mean in this case there were like 8 musicians or so. So we said, okay, maybe choose 4 each or 5 each. and then maybe it's the same one at the same time, which was also nice. And sometimes there was no one, which is also good. So again, it's this keeping sort of openness a bit to the arrangement of it. Yeah. Yeah.
Czyli partyturą jest ten układ gestów i rąk. How about the notes? Is it like one gesture and one note, one phrase?
It's mostly it's mostly based on one note, and there's a synthesized track which is spread over 4 speakers where the sounds are kind of moving through the space. So that's why I said they sometimes that's my F sharp. So they don't look at the video. Actually, there were screens also here, so they can see
so they could see.
Yeah. But I had that with other pieces as well, with video scores, and it was an interesting thing to realize that musicians prefer listening than watching. The watching is nice for the audience, but the musicians actually respond better when there's a kind of audio signal that they can respond to. So,
Więc zapytałam też o to, czy jakiś dźwięk jest przypisany do każdego gestu, więc jest oczywiście i że naturalnym jest też, że muzycy potrzebują czasami bardziej dźwięku niż obrazu, który pomoże im po prostu w odnajdowaniu się w tej partyturze, więc muszą sobie wybrać najlepiej około 4 takich gestów, 4 dźwięków, które będą wykonywać później i reagują. Tutaj mówił kompozytor, że jest też dodatkowy obraz wideo, ale to widzą głównie jakby odbiorcy, tak? Jakby to widownia widzi, więc bardziej reagują w sumie jednak na sygnał dźwiękowy niż na sam obraz, co jest też dość ciekawym zjawiskiem, w jaki sposób też reagują i zapamiętują, prawda? To na ile też ten gest trwa, jak on jest osadzony właśnie w tempie i w dynamice.
Okay, and I just wanted to finish with this piece because it's my most recent piece, and I got the recording really a few days ago. So I can show you a bit of that. It was a very nice project because I was asked to participate and compose for this orchestra called the Future Traditions Orchestra. It was a project of this curator Elisa Erkelens in Dresden. And so she got together about 20 different musicians from very different backgrounds. So you had like Turkish, Uzbek, Iranian, Japanese, Korean. It was a very mixed group. And so I had to want to think of some piece that would work with all these instruments. I know Turkish music very well because I play the oud, and I learned that after I left school. Like I really wanted to learn traditional Greek music, and I ended up learning this kind of, let's say, this Ottoman tradition, which is influencing Greek folk music. So I know that how musicians from these backgrounds, from this kind of near Asian, let's say Asian, how they phrase melodies is just so special, and so I just wanted to write something melodic, let's say, which they can phrase in their own way, and the structure that I came up with was this kind of score where it's generative, a bit like orbital, where there's one musician who's triggering the events, so like with the sound. In this case, the example I play, it's the percussionist. So he's like tuck, tuck, and each new event is happening. And it's based on, there's basically 5 different types of notation. There's the song, I call it the song, even though it's not really sung, where you have the white notes, it was night. You have the yellow, which these kind of gliding, they appear and they start gliding through the space. The blue ones, which are these sort of pulses. And the idea is that you follow the pulse and you interact with another musician in the space with the pulse. Oh, it's gone off. And then, is that me or is that, oh yeah. And then you have the red one. It's all gone blue, which is quite nice, actually. You have the red one, which is like this kind of ornament sign, and then this kind of moon, this white thing, which is like this, which the musicians then play this kind of chord or kind of texture or sound. And that's it. And then these islands are kind of constantly being generated by the computer, different sort of islands, which kind of interact with the space. So again, there's a kind of melodic background to the program. So there are 8 songs, let's say, in this whole piece, based on like in literature, but also interviews with people. It also deals with like the last one deals with like experience of like refugees crossing the Mediterranean. So it's all about like different experiences of encountering an island, and so these are all encoded in the code of the software. So, and the idea is that it randomly starts in any place on the melody, and puts and connects with any word. So let's say the words and the notes don't never go together in the same way, but there's still this kind of, each, let's say, song has its own kind of melodic identity, let's say. So I'll just play this. So the score looks something like this. So.
Czyli tutaj mamy nuty konkretne i konkretne melodie. W przypadku tego przebiegu It Was Night mamy żółty kolor, który jest taką linią przebiegającą po prostu, taką łączącą. Mamy kolor niebieski, mamy ten księżyc w obrazie i chyba to słychać lepiej, to ja nie będę zagadywać na razie.
So this is what the score looks like, and again, the let's say whatever happens is sort of random, like what event happens, but it's the let's say the song part is always continuous. Let's say like and so I mean I'll play the so this was the group. It's funny that it's gone blue, like okay, it doesn't matter. So I'll play a bit of the performance just so you see. And then I was really happy with the sound world that was made with this group. that last part was part where there's no text and there's more sound.
So, what musicians need to really memorize? What kind of instructions they really
they just need to know what the function of all the, let's say, the 4 or 5
okay.
different types of notation are, and they have monitors in front of them. And we actually made a structure in this case that the first song is done by this group, then this group, then this group, and gradually opens up. Yeah, so they don't need, in this case, they don't need to memorize anything. They just need to respond to whatever's happening. The DAF player is really controlling the sort of pacing of the piece. And actually, in the rehearsal, I tried giving it to different musicians. I gave it to the vocalist. I gave it to other instruments, and I said, look, I just want to try what. And in the end, actually, this percussionist was the best. Because you have to really, that's a big responsibility, because you have to feel the sort of pace of the piece. I didn't want to do it myself. I could have, but I just wanted, just the musicians themselves control that. Yeah.
Okej, to króciutko. To jedno z ostatnich dzieł, które napisane było i zrealizowane w Dreźnie. Przewidziano tutaj obecność 20 muzyków reprezentujących bardzo różne kultury, bardzo różne nacje i grających też zresztą na różnych instrumentach tradycyjnych. I tutaj kompozytor zwrócił uwagę też na to, że jakby jego zainteresowanie muzyką tradycyjną, instrumentami też przypisanymi do tradycji greckiej czy tureckiej, to jest coś, co jest mu najbliższe. A grał też na tradycyjnym instrumencie, więc to wydawało mu się najbardziej być czytelne i najlepiej tutaj pasujące. No i jak już też słyszeliśmy tutaj, akurat właśnie muzycy nie muszą zapamiętywać jakichś skomplikowanych instrukcji. Jest lista też melodii podana przez kompozytora. Natomiast jeden instrument perkusyjny według idei kompozytora najlepiej jakby realizował taki rodzaj kontrolera, takiego porządku w całości, a muzycy musieli tylko odpowiadać na to, co w tej mapie muzycznej tutaj się pojawiało, w odpowiedni sposób na to zareagować, a więc wybór jest tutaj znacznie szerszy do stworzenia całości. Was it performed once or more?
Yes.
Yes.
This has only been performed once. In a way, this is the score. It basically goes through these different islands.
Okay, and we should respond to this. Yeah, okay. Pytania.
Sorry, I forgot.
Mikrofon.
Yeah.
So I have a question about your theoretical background. I feel there's a lot of cognitive approach to music in your composition in your compositions. So I want to ask: is there something else? Not only perception, communication, language, and music. Maybe there is something else what is interested you in cognitive theories, or maybe there is some particular theory that you are interested in.
No, interesting question. I mean, in my thesis, I think one of the things that I was interested in, specifically to do with language and how we perceive music. I mean, I think I was very interested in that question of, how does music function as a language? Is it like language? Is it different? And can you make parallels with that? What is communicated in music? All these things I found interesting to think about. What conclusions did I reach? I think it was that in a way that, how can I put it easily? Like, I mean, the way I ended up like influencing, let's say, the conclusions that were useful to me, like to use in the music, was to work on this different like layers of communication. So, for instance, and it's something that's not often talked about by musicologists, or like in the sense is that what is communicated in music, firstly, is something outside of the composer's hand. It's the social situation. It's you know, which box, you know, the piece is in. So everything around music is basically says more about what is being communicated than, like, let's say last night's concert, for instance. You know, it's part of a festival called Warsaw Autumn. It exists in this hall. There's a certain sort of meaning there that is actually beyond anything that the music could say. So once we get into the sort of musical part, what is the music itself communicating? I, as a composer, can make a little, like, I mean, we have let's say strings which are playing in a sort of certain classically trained way. So that's also a code that's already, you know, a language that's already been written, let's say, and as a composer, you can just create that small frame by which, you know, that's communicated. So that's like talking about like meaning in music. What can music mean? So when I also talk about layers, there's all these other things about, let's say, beyond the cognitive level. You could say is like, I'll give you an example. Is like whether we find sounds pleasing or not pleasing, for instance, you know, like, so, you know, I sensed also, for instance, last night, there's a certain sounds which can be a bit sort of, you know, like, so people have just, there's nothing to do with processing. It's this kind of pre-cognitive reaction to it. It's like, this sound it's too loud, or it's too noisy, it's making me feel uncomfortable, or, you know, on the other side, this harmony is so beautiful, you know, blah, blah, blah. So I think there are these instinctive reactions we have, which is so subjective, maybe, and you know, it's beyond also the intention, any intention of meaning that's in them, but it's a meaning that's constructed by the social use of these sounds, you know, how we identify with certain sounds. You know, some people identify with noise, some people, you know, identify with classical sound, you know, whatever. So but yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but it's just like general ideas. Like in my thesis, I was really interested, for instance, in hierarchies of media. That was the thing that I found interesting for myself to go into, which is like how we experience one medium through another medium. And for instance, I, as a composer, when I use video, visuals in some way, I'm also, my audience tends to be musicians or music audience, not musicians, audience which is listening, let's say. So and that's very different. Like if from an art audience, if I show the same piece in a museum, and people are much more visually orientated, and they're not so maybe experienced to listening. So already there's this kind of difference of how hierarchy of experience from the different contexts where a piece is played. But I'm very aware when I'm composing of like how I'm going between these different hierarchies of media, also in just sound medium, whether it's with electronics, like notes, harmonies, sounds, text. So for instance, I want to, for me, a successful multimedia piece is one that goes, like, can change your perspective throughout the piece. It might start off with listening in a certain way, and it might change then where, you know, text comes in and I have to experience everything through the text or through the visuals. And this kind of shift of hierarchies of the media, I find an interesting thing for artists, composers, or whatever artists to think about. We have a certain agency to control them, but not all the time, you know. But as how I experience, let's say, films or theater or dance or other multimedia forms, I'm very aware of that, and I know that my attention shifts between different things, and I like that, you know. And okay, this is the final thing. Like, I can go on ages about this. Is compositionally, let's say, one of the things that I hope that I hope I do, is to create a situation where it allows you to shift yourself. So it's not like the composer is telling you, okay, now this, now this, now this, now listen. You know, it's that I try and create a more of a kind of static or flat situation where there is the space to sort of for a listener or audience to just perceive other things. So I think that's one of the things that it's thinking about, let's say, cognitive experience, what kind of situation I'd like to put the audience in. I think I would sum it up like that you know, it can be eventually a complex situation, like we started talking about, but you still, I'm not directing you to what to listen to. You have a bit more agency to like perceive different things. Yeah.
Wyzwanie.
Thank you. Can you translate that?
I memorize all of the melodies, I hope. Więc pytanie oczywiście wydawało się pani proste i oczywiste o tą podstawę teoretyczną, muzykologiczną, kognitywną, bo tutaj jest rzeczywiście obecna. No i odpowiedź jest oczywiście również na kilku poziomach. Bardzo też nieoczywista, ale i oczywista faktycznie, że zainteresowaniem kompozytora cieszy się i tekst, i język, ale też język multimediów. I jak rozumiem tę ostatnią właśnie tutaj konkluzję, to jest próba też stworzenia takiej sytuacji, w której te multimedia, żadno z mediów nie jest dominujące, prawda? Sytuacja jest na tyle statyczna, żebyśmy je mogli połączyć, bo to wynika z doświadczenia wcześniejszego, czyli pracy w momencie, kiedy kompozytor sam tworzy materiał wideo, to on jest inaczej rozpoznawalny dla muzyków, którzy słuchają przede wszystkim i to wideo jest rodzajem materiału rozpoznawczego, ale bardziej muzycznego dla nich. Natomiast zupełnie inaczej sytuacja wygląda, kiedy jesteśmy w muzeum i tutaj są osoby bardziej zorientowane właśnie na sztukę wizualną, inaczej to też odbierają. Kompozytor ma na swoim koncie współpracę zarówno z również autorami, którzy się zajmują tworzeniem dźwięków, kreowaniem dźwięków, ale też i z tancerzami i właśnie z artystami wideo, a więc w momencie, jest to inaczej, kiedy on sam jest jakby odpowiedzialny za całość, a w momencie, kiedy współpracuje z innymi artystami, to też jest zupełnie inaczej. Mówił też o pewnej hierarchii, prawda, pracy nad utworem, kiedy wybór jest od strony muzycznej, ale jest też wybór tekstu i rodzaj komunikacji, z którą wchodzimy, kiedy używamy innego medium. Więcej grzechów nie pamiętam, ale wydaje mi się, że to jest najlepsza i taka podsumowująca wypowiedź, bo prawdopodobnie jeszcze jakieś pytanie z Państwa strony się rodzi do tak bogatej twórczości. Okay, one more question.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask about your origins and the interest in these kind of scores, because you were trained in a more classical way and you did write and you still write, because like the piece from yesterday you mentioned is written in a more linear way. the sheet is quite classical in its understanding. And my question is, when and how did you become more interested and more inclined towards these sorts of scores?
Yeah, I don't know. I think, I guess quite early on, as a composer, I was always a bit outside sort of classical tradition. Like I was just interested in many different musics. As I mentioned traditional Greek, but also there was, I played jazz and I was interested in electronic music. There was already, for me, it didn't have to be like classical. And so I was aware of different practices. In my early career, I think I did a lot of dance, contemporary dance and theater stuff. So I already understood that the differences, say, between the concert hall and performative space. So this idea of like multimedia was already sort of interested quite early on. Like the piece you mentioned with the insects, for instance. I think back then I had this idea, maybe it's still relevant, that I wanted to place, like, kind of create situations which are sort of context is a kind of dissonance in context. So like, I was using a lot of soundtracks, field recordings, but also synth to create like dissonances between different types of musics. And I think with the scores itself, that really came from, I think maybe just my experience as a musician, because I was improvising a lot also in my early 20s, first on violin, oud, but more traditional stuff, but then with the early laptop scene, let's say, in the early 2000s, I was, or late 90s, early 2000s, I was, so as an improviser, the kind of musicians that I was working with, I thought, okay, and actually it came from, the first piece I actually did was because Musikfabrik, the German group, asked me, can you write us an improv score? And I was like, to write an improv score? I couldn't really, didn't know what to do. I ended up doing like, a score with kind of complex, with different functions where they had moments to improvise. And so I think that was the first time actually I was challenged with the idea of making a score. Actually, these were classical musicians, they weren't improvisers, but they wanted to improvise. So so it came from that, I think. It came from, I think the situation arose because people knew that I was also an improviser, and then I tried to bring these two worlds for myself together. I think that's a lot of, actually, you see that in a lot of composers. I teach and a composer might come and say, well, I do this, or I have a rock band, or I'm interested in this music, or and then there's the classical music, and I think I always say, look, just keep both going. At a certain point, you might want to bring them together. You don't have to, but it's good not to like totally reject one side of your kind of musical personality or interests, and that, yeah, I think that's what happened to me. It's sort of my many interests, different functions sort of came together like a bit, yeah. And maybe I still haven't figured it out totally, it's still, I can't really place myself. I'm this kind of, I just presented this today also because it's like the last years, I have to confess, I am more interested in doing this kind of stuff, more.
Cóż, to ostatnie pytanie było, czy może jeszcze jakieś na podsumowanie? Bo pytanie było, Julio, o przygotowanie i odkrycie tego momentu, kiedy właśnie ten rodzaj komponowania dla kompozytora stał się najbardziej interesujący, czyli nawet jeśli chodzi o przygotowanie to klasyczne, to kompozytor stwierdził, że jednak jest troszkę outsiderem od samego początku, że interesowała go od początku improwizacja, że również i jazz, i granie na instrumencie tradycyjnym. To są różnego typu zupełnie przestrzenie muzyczne i sposoby gry, ale chyba jednak tym punktem zapalnym było zamówienie od Musikfabrik na konkretny utwór, w którym miały być sekcje właśnie improwizowane, i to był taki początek, aby zacząć zajmować się czymś, co właściwie okazało się być najbardziej fascynujące i doprowadziło do tego typu partytur, które dzisiaj mieliśmy okazję też zobaczyć. So,
the last question that could finalize this meeting could be, where do you see yourself and your music going from now on, further on? Do you have an idea?
To be honest, I have no idea.
That's good.
I mean, that's the thing. It's like I think like many artists, you get it's kind of curiosity for the next project. Like I always just get excited by some new idea or something new, and part of you can't escape who you are. So you know, there's certain things you always do as you do, but like you want to constantly stimulate and excite. So for me at the moment, I mean, like I just did something. I'm getting more into sort of generative stuff. I wouldn't call it AI because it's like too much like misunderstanding about that. Let's put it that way. Like, but so there's a whole like bunch of like in this kind of generative direction that I'm sort of interested in. But yeah, I have no idea what will happen with that. So actually, it's funny because I get asked often like AI in music. What you know, like, and I find it more and more difficult. I think a year or 2 years ago I had an answer for that. I don't dare even say anything now. It's just like I think none of us really kind of know how fast it's going, and yeah.
Czyli przyszłość maluje się raczej w ciekawości. Taki wniosek z tego na wielki finał, na podsumowanie dzisiejsze. Bowiem kompozytor jeszcze rok, 2 lata temu stwierdził, byłby bardziej chyba otwarty na udzielenie takiej odpowiedzi, a teraz myśli o tym, że to ciekawość cały czas powoduje nim. I sam się zastanawia nad tym, co będzie dalej, i też przemiany w zakresie sztucznej inteligencji dużo nam pokazują. Właśnie, a więc już nie jest tak bardzo pewien tego, no ale to wyzwanie i to wyzwanie dla nas wszystkich, myślę. Ja dziękuję bardzo Państwu za dzisiejsze spotkanie. Zapraszam dalej do uczestnictwa o godzinie 15:00. Tutaj będą warsztaty z młodymi kompozytorami, więc mam nadzieję, że ci kompozytorzy już z nami są albo do nas dotrą. I warsztaty są jak najbardziej otwarte, więc tym razem nasz gość wystąpi w roli nauczyciela, obserwatora i rozmówcy z młodszym pokoleniem kompozytorów. So thank you so much, Yannis.
Thank you.
It's really impressive, really. And I also invite our audience to stay with us for the workshop with young composers, which is going to be in 45 minutes, actually. Okay. So we have a 45 minutes pause right now, break, to have a little walk in this area. It's unbelievably sunny Sunday today. And please come back to join us at 3 for the young composers meeting and workshop with our today's star.
Thanks a lot, Alexandra. Thank you for the questions also. Yeah.